the slide now. Yesterday we've gone through asynchronous replication, which is replication, what we call a traditional replication. So we normally do asynchronous replication from one group to the other. However, in firmware version 7, or actually version 6, we introduced a new feature called sync-rep. So what's the difference between synchronous replication and asynchronous replication? So as you can see from this diagram in here, right, you have two okay. All right. I probably need to stop this slide because I don't have write access. Just bear with me. Okay. And I start again. All right. So as you can see from the previous slide or small videos or capture, it basically, you have two pools in here, right? And then there is a synchronous or continuous replication between the two pools. And then as soon as it finishes writes on both pools, it sends acknowledgement to the host. So what is this used for? This is used for a particular volume that requires high availability. Okay.
So meaning,
You want
if
to, for example,
three questions. If something happens on the volume on the first copy or original copy,
yep,
so there's a possibility that there's another the same might happen to this to the secondary copy, right? So let's say for example you accidentally
yes.
deleted the volume.
Okay. So again, this is protecting a pool, right? So in case this pool goes down, you have another pool to recover from.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that if what happens here, so it will also happens on the other pool.
Yes. So you can have this two pool in here, right? And this pool is down,
Okay.
right? Your production is still up. This is you have what we call the primary one and then the secondary one. So both one, those two is not active at the same time, but it's actually synchronizing at the same time. So this is one of them going to be active, one of them going to be passive. That is how it's working in the background.
So as you have mentioned, sync rep is this is not something to do with synchronous rep, right? So meaning if there's an online what do you mean by that? So this is a live updates of what is happening on the original site, right, sir? If you're implementing this type of replication.
What do you mean by live update?
So real-time replication.
Correct. So this real-time replication.
Yes, let's say for
So
if something's happened on your on the first site. So let's say for example you deleted the first volume on your primary site. So tendency the secondary on your secondary site, the volume will also be deleted, right? Since this is a
yes,
bonus.
yes, correct.
Okay.
So this particular replication doesn't protect against data corruption.
So what?
Okay, it only protects pool against pool. So if this one goes down, you have another pool to cover you.
Okay. Wala siyang pakialam.
You will see on the next slide what is actually sync wrap protect and doesn't protect.
Okay.
Okay, is that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So there, do we have a minimum distance to implement this synchronous replication? Sige, sige. Tanong.
Um, the minimum requirements is actually in regards to your network. Okay, you cannot have a network that's quite has latency, right? So this is between the two pool, and then you have your network in here, where network is critical in here. If your network is slow, then your performance in here is going to be slow as well. Because when a host writes, before it sends acknowledgement, it needs to write to both sides.
Okay, so what's the recommended and best practice way to implement this type of synchronous replication? So what's the bandwidth that we need to use, and then is there any delay or on delay on the updates?
Okay, delay, in terms of delay, it's just about latency.
Yeah, later.
So response time. So for example, you typing something on your keyboard. As soon as you type something, it appears on your monitor, right? But sometimes if there is a latency, if, for example, you're doing an RDP to US, for example, when you type something, it takes time to appear on your remote desktop in US. Okay, so that is a typical scenario if you have a high latency network or a slow bandwidth between one pool to the other. Okay, the normal scenario, as you know, is one pool sitting on the same data center, but sometimes they want to configure this across data center. For that to happen, you need to make sure that on both data center you have a good connectivity, low latency network, high bandwidth connectivity. Is that answer your question, Richard?
Okay. Yes, sir.
Okay. If you have any question or you're not clear, let me know. I'm more than happy to. If you want, you have an example, for example of the real life scenario or a diagram that you want me to go through, I'm more than happy to help you out.
Ano setup niyo dito? Naka 1 gig yung or naka...
Or you can type in on the chat window.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll pick up
All right. Nice. All right. This is a replication model with SyncWrap. Okay. You have multiple pool in here. You can have a cross replication, or you have your side-by-side replication. Okay.
Where are the members on that?
Where's the member? What do you think? Where's the member?
Like all C and D as one member, all A and B as one member.
Can a member consist of multiple? Can a pool consist of multiple members?
No.
So you can. Doesn't really matter.
Okay.
Because we're talking about
That's
pool.
like it, yeah.
Pool is kind of enclosures.
Yeah,
Okay,
cool.
so
Yeah.
all right, this is the design goal. Okay, Sync wrap between two pools within the same group, and each pool can contain different member size, type, disk speed, and rate. Okay, so why it's good? Because it used the same well-known IP address, same IQN. So in case you have a downtime, you basically just need to switch over, and then from the host perspective, it doesn't see nothing needs to be changed from the host perspective. Okay, and then snapshots continue to be created on that volume. What that means is, as soon as you you can actually enable snapshot on that volume, and if there is something happens, it will actually hold the changes until that other volume becomes available, and then trying to resync the changes. Okay, and then this is always have a crash consistent view of the data. Yes, because what's happening in the background is it only sends acknowledgement after it writes to both pools, which means it's crash consistent. If the primary one goes down, then the data between those two are always the same, because nothing will be acknowledged if both is not in sync. Okay. So this is the requirements, as I mentioned. It's firmware version 6. Pools must be in a flat network, so you cannot have a routed network. Okay. This is what I said earlier. Latency. Okay. The bandwidth at least 1 gig. Distance typically less than 10K, or often less. Again, latency is the key factor, because acknowledgement, if you haven't acknowledged it, you're not gonna get response. So yeah, latency is the key factor for sync wrap to work properly, and then you get benefit out of it. Okay. Volumes cannot be configured for both traditional replication and sync wrap. Rethinning is not recommended, and then up to 32 sync wrap enabled volumes is a non PS4000 group, and then there is a minimum of 5% snapshot reserve required. Okay, this is a minimum. We always recommend more, because that will able to hold more changes when it's out of sync. This is the different business case where you want to implement a sync replication or traditional replication and synchronous replication. Traditional, it's a point-in-time copies. So if you have a corruption on your primary, then you can restore to a previous point in time. Asynchronous, on the other hand, is a real-time two identical copies of a volume in a single group, which means it doesn't actually protect against data corruption. Okay, so if someone corrupt your data, it will be written on both sides. Next, protects against regional disasters. Like I said, it's protecting your pool. Okay, so in case one data center goes down, we're hoping that the other one is still up. Synchronous replication, protects against data center down in a campus environment. So one is talking about regional and one is talking about campus. Why? Because synchronous replication, latency, again, latency is the key factor. Sorry about that, we're just going back. So you cannot have a regional disaster protection if you use a synchronous replication, because usually a regional disaster is it's a long distance, right? So latency normally it's high when you use a traditional replication. Traditional replication provides multiple recovery points because multiple point in time copies. Okay. This one does protect against data corruption, but synchronous replication doesn't protect against data corruption. In traditional replication, state of data between recovery points could be lost. Now, in terms of recovery time, initiator must be configured to log in to recovered volumes because is this. So you have your production group, you have your DR group, right? You're doing a replication. The volume in here and then the volume that you promote in here has two different IQN, right? Hence, if you have initiator in here, you need to configure your initiator to accept a volume from this DR side. However, if you have a synchronous replication, it's as easy as just switch over in Group Manager. You don't need to touch your initiator at all. In terms of recovery point, multiple recovery point, okay? And in synchronous replication, only single recovery point. So keep in mind about that. You need to decide which one is fit for your business requirement. Network requirements. Again, we talk about bandwidth, latency. Okay, there is no significant affected by distant bandwidth or latency, but this one, it does. Okay, as you know, distance relate to latency, and then bandwidth relate to how much data can it pass through in a pipe. So if you have a bad network between pools, then you cannot do synchronous replication. This is synchronous replication in design, in details. Okay. A volume that is configured for sync rep can be in one of the following three states. First, in sync. What is in sync? Both knows the same thing. Same like synchronization, okay? So you have your active sync in Exchange. You probably know that very well. Both always have the same information. Pause, okay? So changes to the volume are stored in the snapshot until sync wrap is resumed. That is why I'm saying 5% is a minimum. So if you have very limited amount of snapshot reserve, you cannot hold the information while sync wrap is paused. Then this is the worst. It is out of sync. Okay. The pools do not contain the same data, and only sync active has recent data. So you don't want a situation where from pause going to auto sync. So you see in here, if a snapshot reserve space for the volume is full, then it will go to out of sync. That's a bad situation. So this is how it works in general. So you have your iSCSI initiator in here, right? And then it start writing. It needs to write to both of your volume in a pool. Then it will send acknowledgement back. Okay. Then after you have your acknowledgement finished, and then both pool are in sync, or both volume sync wrap volume are in sync, then you can perform a switch. Okay, otherwise you will not be able to switch it over. This is where out of sync happen. All writes goes to your active. Okay, all reads are done in sync active pool only. So basically it only goes here and here. The failover is not allowed. So you cannot fail over to your sync alternate because that will cause problem. So this is how you getting back in sync. You unreplicate changes are sent to the sync alternate volume in the background, or new IO are sent to both pools like when in sync. Okay. So this is where you have your snapshot tracking changes. And then as soon as your sync alternate is back, then it will go here and then try to update your sync alternate. So this is the important term. You have your sync active, and then you have your sync alternate. All right. So you cannot have both in active mode. You can always only have a situation one is active and one is in alternate method of sync alternate. How do you configure sync wrap? It's quite easy. Okay, so you select your volume, look at activities, and then configure sync wrap. Next, you will have your name for your volume, your sync wrap volume, and then you pick your storage pool. Again, in here, you only have two. Why? Because you can only see one option available. In here, you configure your, in here, you have your summary. And then you have your volume icon. Will change. Now, where do we configure the 5% snapshot? We configure it on the original volume because the snapshot only applies on the sync active. If we're looking at here. Where is it? Here. Right? Sync active is where the volume is actually located. So this is where you need your 5% snapshot reserve is. So when you create your sync wrap volume, it's not going to ask you for snapshot reserve anymore. Right, so this is how you look at or how you check your sync wrap. You will see in here, like I mentioned, you have your default pool and you have your sales pool, right? Again, sync wrap needs to happen between the two pools. And then in here, you have your status in sync. Then you have the option to switch, right? You can do pause, you can disable, you can disconnect sync active. Let's discuss about sync active and sync alternate. Okay. Switching to sync alternate only available when volume images are in sync. We already know about that, right? Change the role of the pools. Switching to sync alternate will cause ISCAS initiator to be redirected to the new sync of the active volume? Yes, because you have two pools, right? So you have a host in here, it will be redirected to here. The switch should complete in a second or less. Yes, in theory. Why? Because you need this low latency network. If you don't have low latency network, then this will take ages sometimes. Okay, to switch, it's quite easy. You switch it over and it will change. Yeah. You will see in here, pool B becomes active and pool or default pool becomes sync alternate. We talk about now about snapshot space and sync wrap volume. Creating a snapshot of volume will create a snapshot in the sync active pool only. We already know about that. Like I mentioned, it only sits on the active one. As with the snapshot of volume for which synchronous replication is not enabled, you can access the data in the snapshot by setting the snapshot online or cloning it, regardless of what pool it is in. Okay. Yes, we already know about that because you can only have one active, right? If you have your snapshot in here, you will not be able to access this snapshot because remember, as per my questions, where's the snapshot reserve? It follows the volume, okay? So if the volume is sitting on the different pool, then the only way you can actually see it or access that particular snapshot is by switching over. So that's why that statement related to. Okay. Next, switch over or failover moves where a schedule creates a snapshot to the new sync active pool, but existing snapshot remain in the pool they will create it in. Yep, we already know that because again, snapshot follows where the volume is actually sitting. Okay. A temporary snapshot are created in both pools to ensure changes to the volume are tracked if the volume is out of sync. Yep, that's part of the process. Okay, so we have an example in here. We have a volume called a test volume. At 441, no, let's go back here. At 425, this sync wrap pool is the actual sync active. Okay, and then you're taking two snapshots, 425 and 435. And then after that, you're doing a switch over and the default pool becomes unsync active. And then you create two snapshots, 441 and 446. So how many snapshots you have? You have 4 in total. Okay. However, you can only access 2 at a time, depending on which particular pool you are on. Okay?
Okay.
Do they sync?
What do you think?
Yeah.
If they sync, why do you need 4 snapshots? Okay, so we have a question from our team over here. Are those 2 snapshots synced to each other? The answer is no. Okay, so these 4 snapshots are not syncing to each other. That's why you have 4 individual snapshots instead of 2 individual snapshots. Okay. That's why you have your in-use space is different between these two. Otherwise, if it's in sync, then it will be the same.
When it does sync, like, does it catch up eventually? Or snapshots will always have a different sync? Or
Snapshot
sync?
always different.
Yeah.
Reason being, as I mentioned, when you is sitting on your default pool in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
You store your snapshot in your default pool,
Yeah.
and then you basically, the only way you can access this is by switching over, right?
Yeah.
If you are in sync, that means you can access this at any point because it's in sync,
Yeah.
right? So the answer is no, snapshot never ever in sync. Only the volume in sync. Now we talk about sync wrap collection. So this is a typical, no difference with a volume collection. Okay, so it allows the ability to create crash consistent snapshot across multiple volumes. So if you, for example, you have an Exchange server and you want to create crash consistent between your logs file and then your database file, because those two database and log files are stored in the two different volumes. That means you need to create a volume collection. Okay, so collection can contain up to 8 volumes. Reason to no longer use collection as a way to group a list of volume together. This can be done through volume folder starting in version 6. All right, so there is another option in versions from version 6 and above, which is using volume folders. What is a collection of sync wrap? It's just collection for sync wrap volumes. Additional functionalities allows all volumes to be posted at the same time. Yep, same thing. Because it's a collection, you can do one action and it will apply to both volumes. Allows a volume to be switched over or fail over at the same time. And guarantees that all volumes have the same crash consistent point. This is the critical part. Okay, why we have a volume collection is to have a crash consistent point. Enabling sync wrap for collection. What you need to do, collection for sync wrap volume are configured in the same manner as a regular volume. Sync wrap must be disabled before a volume can be saved in the volume recovery bin. So, and you can have a look at the notes. What are the restrictions? All right. So this is how to show if you have your sync wrap collection. You will see your two volumes in here. Now this is a troubleshooting part. You have a failover situation. If the sync active volume becomes unavailable while the volume is in sync, you can safely fail over to sync alternate volume. Although host access to the volume is disrupted during the switch, no initiator changes are required. What that means, okay, so you have a volume sitting on your default pool. You have your sync wrap volume sitting on your sales as per previous example. Now, you have your host in here, right? Again, sync wrap will have an identical or the same IQN name or IQN number, right? When you're doing a switch over to your alternate, this will take time. In theory, it's going to be taking seconds, but it's still time. So there is some interruption in here. All right. So you need to make sure you're aware of that. It's not like instant up and running. There is none in EQL to allow you to do that. Okay. So you need to manually actually switch it over, and then a host can access the same volume from your alternate location. If the sync active volume becomes unavailable while the volume is out of sync, any changes written to the sync active volume that have not yet been replicated to sync alternate pool will be lost and cannot be recovered. Okay. Failovers should only be performed under extraordinary circumstances. Now, what this means is if you have your, again, I'm just writing two pools, and then you have your sync wrap out of sync, right? And then you have still your snapshot sitting here, and then your volume is in here, right? If you switch over from here to here, then you're not gonna get the most up-to-date information, because there are plenty of information needs to be transferred from your snapshot goes to your sync alternate. All right, so only when you totally don't have this particular pool, then you have no choice to move to this alternate solution. But it's not recommended because you don't get the most up-to-date data. Changes cannot be tracked in a snapshot if there is not enough snapshot reserve space. We already know about that. What's going to happen is it's going to move to out of sync scenario instead of false. Sync wrap must be disabled before a volume can be saved in the volume recovery bin. Yeah, we know about that as well. Network consideration, flat network, same subnet, not routed, compression, deduplication, and encryption, all at latency. Again, keyword latency are not recommended. Utilize the same switch technologies for the sync active and sync alternate pools. Yeah, makes sense. Maintain short distance between pools for acceptance level of latency. Pretty much this all network configuration is talk about latency, latency, latency. Okay, so latency is the key factor of sync wrap to work properly. All right, that's the end of module sync wrap. Do we have any questions? Richard?
Questions?
No? Okay.
For sync wrap, pwede rin two-way.
Can we do a two-way sync replication?
Two-way sync replication? No. So what do you mean is like this? You have a volume in here. Like that?
Yeah.
No, you can't.
So
Why?
one can be considered sync active and the other one is sync alternative, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So you don't need to actually do two ways, because at one point, right, there's only one active. You cannot have both active. Okay, so there is no reason for you to have this two-way replication.
Paano may volume mo din sa iba na gusto kong i-replicate na taas?
Ano?
Diba?
Hindi. Ano yun talaga yung
Any
logic
questions?
nung secret. Yung parang...
Hindi, meron akong dalawang array. Yung isang volume dito.
If not, we'll go to review questions. And then, do you want to take break or lunch break after that?
Okay, sir. Question?
Hi, Alan, can we ask?
Hi, Alan.
Yes, I'm here.
We have to follow questions about the secret.
You have what's your question?
Let's say we have one volume on the first array, and then we are doing a sync rep going to the second array.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a volume on the second array, and then I want to do a sync rep going to the first array. Is it possible?
Yes, that's possible. Because this is talking about pool. Let's have a look at this. This is a good example here. Okay? So this is answer your question. You can have your mail going into pool D. You can have your file share going to your pool B. Or you can have your file share going to pool A. It doesn't stop you. But we're not talking about member, okay? We are talking about pool. So if both members sitting on the same pool, then no, you cannot do that. Needs to be two different pool.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
None, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, let's do module review.
Right.
What is a sync rep? Synchronous replication of volume within multiple group. Yeah, we know about that. Provides near zero RPO or very low RTO. Okay, so we know what sync rep. What roles do pools play for a volume when it is configured with sync rep? So what is the two main role that we can see when we have when we configure your sync rep? Sorry? Yep. Which one? So every time we have picture of sync rep, you will see next to the pool name there is something. What is it? Sync active and alternate. Okay, so you know which one is active, you know which one is alternate. You cannot have both active. What is required to configure a group for sync rep? Okay, what is it? We already talked about this. Sync rep only works if you have two valid pools. Okay, so you need to have two pools. You cannot have one pools. Two pools means minimum how many members? The minimum is two members because you cannot have one member belongs to two pool. Okay, so one member can only belongs to one pool. What is required to configure a volume for sync wrap? 5% snapshot. Why? Because we want to prevent a volume going out of sync, right? So in case you have a network connectivity issues, it still can hold the changes while it's waiting for the write to go through the second pool or your sync alternate pool. Okay, any questions?
No.
Would you use,
No? Okay. We have a question in here. Yep.
would you use the smart, what's it called? Like this. You know the smart,
Smart copies?
Smart copy.
Yep.
Use smart copy and sync wrap.
Okay, we have a question here, Richard and the team. Should we use smart copies in combination with sync wrap? Yeah, why not? Because again, when you have a sync wrap, it doesn't protect you against data corruption. But with smart copies, it protects you against data corruption because you have a point in time copies or snapshot to be precise.
Yeah, all right, that's awesome.
Okay, so it's I think it's 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock your time. I'm more than happy to continue doing module 10, or you want to take a break.
Take a break.
It's up to you.
Uh,
We are about 3 module behind.
break, sir.
Break? Okay. Let's take a break and then we'll be back. If you don't mind, we'll take about 45 minutes break today because we have a few things to cover, okay?
Okay.
We lost a few hours today.
Okay. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Sure.
All right, I'll see you in about 45 minutes.
All right. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.